This happened sometime in 2009 when my friend Rachel was 16 years old at the time of this story. And this sometime happened around maybe late of 2009 when Rachel was babysitting a 5-year-old girl. This 5-year-old girl's name, we'll call her Jennifer. Jennifer was a 5-year-old girl who was autistic, and she even had some issues, such as one of them being she has dyslexia, and of course she has ADHD with depression, anxiety, and was diagnosed with epilepsy at the time. She had so many issues and had to be on a lot of medications, and there was some strict rules for her. Now, Rachel at the time of the story was 16, and she thought that when she was babysitting Jennifer, she would get some time to catch up on her schoolwork. Now, it was raining at the time, so Rachel got a ride from her mom as her mom dropped her off at the house. Of course, the parents were going to be out all night, so they said to Rachel things such as they will pay her some money need for pizza and etc. Now, this was on a Friday, so Rachel didn't have to worry about going to school the next day. When she got off school, she went home to get her stuff and got ready, and she was at Jennifer's house around 5 p.m. When she got there, the parents gave some rules about Jennifer, such as do not leave her home alone, take her wherever the babysitter goes, etc., and simple rules. But one of them is to not let anyone else in the house unless if it was the parents or a family member of Jennifer's. Now, Rachel kind of knew Jennifer's parents for maybe a few years now, and she had babysat Jennifer maybe twice when she was about 4 or 5, but maybe 3 at most. Now, it was raining at the time, so Rachel was busy doing her schoolwork while Jennifer was watching TV. It was probably around maybe 7:30 p.m. where Rachel asked Jennifer to get ready for bed, which Jennifer only complained a little bit of and asked to stay up a little later. That's when Jennifer forgot at least a few more minutes to stay up a little extra late after getting ready for bed. However, as Rachel was staring at the window, though, she heard what seemed to be Jennifer talking in the bedroom. Now, this was shortly after Jennifer had went to bed, and she was talking to someone or something up in her room. Rachel thought that since she was autistic, she could be talking to herself, so she decided to check on Jennifer to see if Jennifer was okay. Jennifer said she was fine, and of course Rachel left her to do her thing. However, as Rachel was looking outside, she ended up seeing that seems to be that there was lightning outside, indicating that a thunderstorm was going by. While she was looking and watching the storm as she was catching up with her work, she suddenly saw Jennifer talking again. Rachel got up to see if Jennifer and tell her to go to bed, but Jennifer said, "Oh, I was talking to this man. He's pretty friendly." Now this really freaked Rachel out as Rachel grabbed Jennifer and they went over to another room where Rachel locked the door and called the cops. As soon as the cops showed up at the door, they ended up searching the house and even the bedroom where Jennifer pointed at. They couldn't see anyone in the bedroom. And what's really confusing was that the window was wide open. Now that indicated that somebody or something must have got out of the window. I really don't know what to think of this, but after what Rachel told me, Rachel said that it could have been maybe a real man or a woman or one really talking to Jennifer and probably got out as soon as the police were called. But nothing like this has ever happened since then, and Rachel's never babysat Jennifer again. Not after this incident. She still does not know who was in that room with Jennifer and what could have been happening if the police were not called. About maybe a few years ago, this was actually very creepy that happened to me. I babysat a young girl named Reagan, and I was about maybe 17 at the time. Now, this happened at least during one of my days while I was doing a course called co-op. I think this might have been maybe in October or November, Not really sure. But of course, I didn't have school that day because the job I normally worked at was doing a loading day. So I wasn't allowed to go in there. Now, it was during the shop time hours, and this was around 2015, in the late 2015, and I was on the final grade. However, though, my boss, or aka the owner of the barn, asked me to babysit her daughter for at least a few hours of my work time, as the other worker would be looking after her. Since the daughter was not feeling good, I'd be looking after her. She was about 5 years old, which it wasn't really too common for, young kids to be babysat. It was very common. Now, I was at the barn doing my usual thing, and I was looking after her, and at the same time, I was making sure she was feeling okay. She was not feeling good, as there was like a little flu bug going on, and it wasn't really surprising that it was in the elementary school. As I was doing my usual thing, working and keeping an eye on her, I looked over to see that there was someone or something standing in the middle of the field. I honestly couldn't see what it was, thinking it might have been maybe just one of the horses or possibly one of the workers coming in. But my other worker was already in doing the stalls, so I assumed that maybe this was just maybe someone playing a prank. There was a couple pranksters in the area where the barn was located, so it didn't really surprise me. As I was looking after Reagan, she was usually doing her own thing, when all of a sudden I looked over to see that there was this ghost woman face, or something like that, peeking in one of the windows of the barn. She was screaming, and this honestly made me lock the barn, and I screamed at her, telling her to get out. After I screamed for multiple times, the other worker asked me what was all the screaming, and I told her that there was a woman outside. The woman was gone, however, so my other worker thought that maybe it might have been something that I was imagining. So I got back to doing my own business. But it wasn't until my worker screamed, saying that there was the same woman again, and this time it was on the other side of the doors. That's when we ended up calling the cops, after we called the owner and told her about the situation. She said to lock up all the barn entrances and making sure that girl does not get in. So we called the cops, and we waited about a half an hour for the cops to arrive, but we had to make sure on Reagan to check on her. Of course, Reagan asked us what was going on, and we told her that everything was fine and that there was a situation going on. I didn't want to scare her, and neither did my coworker at the time. So when the cops arrived, they searched the place, but they couldn't find the woman. All we described was that the woman to be wearing white, and she seemed to be screaming, had long blonde hair or something like that. But of course, when the police looked, they still couldn't find her, which obviously made us wonder why she wasn't there, or why the woman was not there. This honestly made us really wonder why the woman was not there, but for some reason, they still couldn't find her. I showed her the places where the woman was and was screaming at us, but they couldn't find her anywhere. I'm assuming that maybe whatever happened that day was completely paranormal, especially while babysitting. But right now, I have no idea why this woman was there. But the rest of the babysitting went well, and I didn't have to worry about that woman again once I got off of work. However, though, I still wonder what this woman was doing and if it was paranormal. If that was paranormal and was the case, then I don't really believe in the paranormal. But after this experience, I really don't know what to believe in anymore. This actually happened to one of my good friends named Jason, and this was around the time when he was around 7, and he was being babysat by this one guy named David. David was maybe, I guess, in his 30s, and he babysat for Jason a lot when he was a kid. Jason did a lot of things, such as taking Jason bowling, to the movies, and other fun activities, while Jason's parents were away for a certain amount of days, like for a few days, to maybe about overnight, or maybe during the day, nighttime after school, etc. David was a really nice babysitter, and David really enjoyed spending time with Jason. Jason really liked David, but then he started to notice something weird about him. I guess it might have been maybe be around the time when he started to notice that, well, David's behavior started to act very strange, which to Jason, he didn't really think much of it at the time, but some of it did seem to be making Jason uncomfortable. When David asked Jason, certain questions, like personal questions, David actually went as far as asking Jason about if he liked him. But of course, he liked him as a babysitter, not more than that. But this started to get more creepy by the minute. This honestly started to make, Jason uncomfortable, since David was asking him such personal questions. And this was honestly a really weird question to ask, but whenever David asked Jason certain questions, Jason started to get more anxious. He considered on trying to go in and talk to his parents and tell them about what David was doing, but didn't want to think that he was lying or something, fearing that he might get into trouble or maybe something, or they wouldn't believe him in any way, shape, or form. So Jason just kept his mouth shut. And he didn't really want to go tell anybody about it because he was afraid his parents would think maybe he was just crazy. But it wasn't really that long though, as David suddenly disappeared. Jason honestly had no idea why David really disappeared, and then his parents brought him up the conversation. He said that David had been started talking inappropriately towards Jason about something much inappropriate, mainly really weirded out stuff. Now, David has also done this to other fur kids, which is why he's been fired from being a babysitter, and he got arrested for, being child predator. But with that said, Jason had no idea where David is today, but he hopes that David is still in prison for what he did. It was something David did do a long time ago, and it was something Jason never thought that he would do. Now, this took place when I was about maybe be 18 years old, and this honestly happened one time, and it was about maybe 2017. Now, my boyfriend at the time of this story was someone I met in high school, and he really was really sick one day, so he asked me to babysit his sister, which we'll call her Jaden. Jane was maybe nearly a year old at the time, so she was just a baby. It seemed to be pretty easy and simple enough. I just did some things that his older sister said, such as changing her diaper, giving me some certain rules to follow, and etc. Everything seemed to be all going well. I didn't have any school the next day as I was getting out for a doctor's appointment, so this was honestly a perfect opportunity for me to babysit. Now, I texted my boyfriend a few times just to see how he's doing, and he said he was still not feeling the greatest. Now, at the time of this story, though, this is when things started to get really weird. I was basically sleeping being in my room or the bedroom of the owner's house. I was basically sleeping on their couch after I put their daughter to sleep. I woke up all of a sudden to the baby monitor making this strange noise. At first I thought that maybe it might have been maybe a glitch or something that must have went on, but of course this was starting to get very strange, and all of a sudden I heard this really loud distorted noise. I honestly took a look at the tablet of the baby monitor to see Jaden staring at the camera as if she was being watched. Now, at this point, I honestly went over to her room, but she was already asleep, and this confused me as to how Jaden was being awake at the time when I looked at the monitor to her being, actually sleeping. I went back to the room and just did what I normally did, usually just chilling. But I never got a wink of sleep that night. Honestly, I had no idea what that distorted noise was, if it was demonic or something. But that really freaked me out, knowing that whoever made that noise, it could have been some sort of demon. I shut off the baby monitor for the rest of the night, but I did not even tell anyone about this. They would think I'm crazy, but I actually didn't babysit Jaden since then, and I still wonder why that noise was made if anyone or anything was in there. This honestly still made me confused, but at the same time, I really have no idea what to expect. This honestly really brings me down as to what could have been. I tried to see if I could record that voice again, which was recorded. Thankfully it was, so I was able to sit there and basically download the music or the sound, but no one could even tell me what that sound was. I honestly had no idea what it sounded like, but I don't believe in something, demonic or anything like that. But after this story, I still have questions about this to this day, and I still don't know what those sounds really were, or whoever made them. I still wonder if those were happening maybe a couple nights before, but I really have no idea.